Hello everybody, welcome to Red Tool House. We talk about water a lot on our channel, but it's usually pertaining to our livestock. So here where I'm pumping water straight out of the creek to water our poultry, can I use that same water? Do I pump it out of the creek for personal consumption for Kelly and the boys and I? Not the first idea I go with. But let's talk about ways that we can collect water and treat it to the point that it's safe for us to consume. I think that's super critical on homesteads today. So there are really 3, maybe 4 ways to be able to collect water on a typical homestead. The first, of course, is not as common, and that's municipal water source. A lot of homesteads are rural and out, like we're nowhere near municipal water. Another way, of course, is to drill a well and access your water that way, or hand dig a well. Of course, you then can do rain catchment, catching water from the sky. And then the last, which not too many people do, is pulling water from an impoundment or a local body of water like we're doing here with the creek. I don't know that I would want to make this my top choice for consumption water. So on this property, we have 2 drilled wells. One is right here beside the barn and workshop, and it was here when we bought the property. So it's, I don't know how many years old it is. It's at least 30 or 40 years old. And it's about 55 to 60 feet deep, I believe, and there's water around, usually around the 23-foot mark. And the water that comes out of here is so full of iron. Our little fiberglass shower that we had when we built the workshop, which was actually our garage apartment we lived in for years, it looked like a crime scene in the shower. It was so red from the staining of the iron. So when we built the main house up here on the point, we decided to drill a new well and go 180 feet deep to hit a different aquifer, and then even sleeved or cased that well down the first 100 feet to try to keep the iron and the sulfur out. And we actually ended up with just a little bit of sulfur smell and just trace amounts of iron. So in order to combat those trace amounts of minerals that we found, we decided to put a whole house filtration system in, and basically looked like 2 big scuba tanks. And it had a backflush system. And so that was 23 years ago. So that was the technology at the time, was to filter through 2 different tanks of media. And that would remove the sulfur and the iron, and the backflush every couple days would run it out. Well, that used a lot of water, but it worked fine. And it worked fine for 23 years. But here recently, we noticed it was starting to fail. We were getting trace amounts of iron and sulfur back in the water. There was just systems that were having a lot of air, a lot of issues. So it was time to replace it. So as Providence would have it, about the time we were thinking seriously about replacing it, a company by the name of Simpure Life reached out to us and had some water purification equipment they wanted us to try out. And I was like, perfect. So in talking with their technicians, we put together a system that would work best for our house here. And the system, like most of these new systems, was set to filter down to certain micron levels and then take care of any heavy metals or any issues like that. Recent water tests we had done before we swapped this out actually showed a little bit of trace of lead and copper as well at the kitchen sink. Now, the question is, did that come from our well? Have we introduced something from there? Or is it from the house? The house is plumbed in copper, and of course copper is soldered. Now this was built in 2001, so it should not have had lead-based solder, and copper is copper, of course. So the first thing we had to do, of course, was remove the old system.
into the water. I mean the grass.
How about I just drop it where I can? It's so big on heavy.
Oh, you got this. Strong and masculine.
Come on.
Ah!
That went right in my boot.
Perfect. Here we go.
Okay, so we just reversed everything on the camera. Actually, no. Some dummy. So it's nobody's fault but mine, because the plumber I hired 23 years ago to build this house, I hired. So the last 23 years, I thought this was the end, and then back out and up to the hot water tank and so forth and so on. But no, this is the end. So it came up through the filtration this way, and then up through the walls and back through the hot water tank. It's like a magical figure eight. So we had to pull everything out and do it the opposite way. But if I'd have used my eyes instead of my brain, I would have seen in the old filtration system, had the little arrows pointing which direction the water flow is. So now we got it swapped around, so you can tighten everything up. So the installation of this system was actually pretty simple. Once we took out our old system, the tanks, we had 2 copper stubs that we then converted over to PEX. And this is really the first time I've worked with PEX. I've done a ton of copper, but I was really happy with how PEX goes. In fact, I think, from my experience with PEX, that if you've been scared to do your own plumbing in any homesteading endeavor, PEX could help alleviate those fears, because this is so much simpler than sweating copper. I mean, I think a 3rd grader could put this together. It's really just snap and lock. And so what we did, of course, is we put a shutoff here, so we could be able to shut off the water if we needed to change the filters or do some maintenance there. We also came up, I will recommend, if you're looking to save a little money when working with PEX and you got a 90 degree, use these metal 90 degree bends instead of the brass shark bite fittings or anything like that. These are like $1.50 a piece, whereas the brass fittings are like $8 a piece. So that'd save you some money. But we first went to a spin down, which has a back flush opportunity to it. So I can just open the valve here and rinse that spin down. And that spin down takes it down to 20 microns. So it's going to do a first filter of any solid particles. We have a little bit of algae that I've picked up in this, and that's what I like about these glass spin downs. I can actually see it and see what we're dealing with. So I think we need to shock our well, because we haven't shocked it in probably 15 years, and it needs to have that treatment done. And that will help alleviate that algae. So that's catching a lot of the algae here at the spin down. And then we're going next into a 5 micron filter in this DB10 system. And these filters you can get anywhere. Simpure Life, of course, has them on their website. I think they're even offering specials right now this fall. But this takes it down to 5 microns, filters out any sediment, any solid particles. And then we go over to this other DB10, which is taking care of, it's also a 5 micron, but it's also looking for heavy metals and those type of things. So the lead, the copper, the iron, all those type of things are going to be filtered out here. And of course, it just goes back into our system. The install of this system was really simple. I think once I figured out, the first mistake I had is I put it in backwards. It's a long story, but for the last 20 years, I thought this was the inlet and it's the outlet. But other than putting it in backwards, it took just a couple hours to put it all together. I even made little hooks here to hang my filter wrenches and stuff. And I already had the drain tube from the back flush, so that was very convenient. So we were able to tie into that. And tested it, and once we got all hooked up, we got the water running back through it, and it worked out fine. So this system isn't only effective for well water. If we are doing rain catchment, which is probably what we're going to do up at our off-grid camp, do rain catchment off the cabin, then I would use the very same system. I would use a spin-down filter to pull water from our buried cistern, going through the first micron filter for sediment, and then the second micron filter. Probably wouldn't have to mess with a heavy metal filter, so I could possibly even do a smaller micron. My research and friends that I talked to, that going down to like a 1 micron, not really necessary, and you're kind of just asking for things to get clogged up. The one thing I would add, however, if I was doing rain catchment, is I would add a UV light at the end. And if you know anything about UV light, of course, that ruptures bacteria, anything that would get through those filtration systems, keep you from getting beaver fever, if that would be an option. So this system that you see with the spin down and the 2 DC-10s and the filters that go along with it, really, straight out of pocket retail on Simpure Life was less than $300, I believe. So you could put a system in pretty cleanly. Our old system 23 years ago was several $1,000s, plus the labor to install it. So this would be a way to purify your water inexpensively with the equipment, and I believe anyone with basic DIY skills could take care of that. So Simpure Life even actually went one step further with us, because we talked about a little bit of this traces of copper and lead that was possibly contaminated in the house. So it would be beyond this filtration system that we have in place at the front end. So they sent us a under the sink system that's reverse osmosis that is pretty slick. So let me detail that for you. So the Q3600 is an under the sink reverse osmosis 7-stage filtering system. So it's pretty slick. And it has a lot of neat features. The thing that I like the most are the replacement cartridges for the filters. They have this system where they lock into place and have a saddle clamp that allows it to suck in real tight. So it really reduces any chances of leakage. The filters you can get with extra O-rings, all those little features that you can swap out to eliminate opportunities for leakage. And the way everybody's going with these push connectors, again, as an old school DIY guy that's sweating copper and everything, it just blows my mind how all these things just kind of snap together, that whole shark bite style connection. So super easy to put together. Water lead in, water lead out, and then there's a drain lead that goes to your drain system. And there's no sweating, there's no cutting of pipe. You just clamp it all together, tie it in with your existing plumbing that's going to your sink. And of course, the only thing you have to do is drill a hole in the sink to be able to add the little water faucet. Since it's a tankless system, the unit itself doesn't take up a lot of room under the sink. It's about the size of a small CPU on a computer. It moves water pretty fast. You're getting about an ounce a second, so you can fill up an 8-ounce glass in about 8 seconds. So we're using it now for our drinking water, our cooking water, and filling up our ice trays. So all of the consumption, the direct consumption of water that we're doing now is coming straight from the Q3600, and that gives us the opportunity to eliminate those copper and lead traces that may be coming from the plumbing itself inside the house. All right, so we thought we'd do a quick little science project and see how this is going to work out. So Simpure Life sent me a TDS meter. So what this measures is total dissolved solids in the water. Now it doesn't tell you what those solids are, but it measures those total dissolved solids. So what I have is I have pre-filtered water, so water I got through the back flush in front of the spin down, post-filter, which is water I got from the kitchen sink, water from our Berkey, which is totally independent of this system, and then the Q3600 that's under our sink. And we're going to test the TDSs of all 4 of those. So let's start with our pre-filter. So that reads 344 parts per million. Let's dry it off here a little bit. Post-filter, 350 parts per million, so 6 parts higher. Interesting. We go over to Berkey, 350 parts per million, so the same as the post-filter. And we go over to the Q3600 and we get a reading of 16 parts per million. So the thing that really jumps out at me here, Why would post-filter be higher than pre-filter? Well, there's a chance that there's stuff that's getting picked up in the line. You can see here the quality of water. Since this is pre-filter, it looks a little murky. So it has a little bit of that algae that we've talked about. The filtration system is definitely taking care of the algae. The Berkey, that just makes me wonder. I'm just not sure about that. We may have to change our filters, or we may have an issue there. I would expect the Berkey to do a little bit better than that. So the Q3600 is doing an incredible job of removing solvents from the water. So much that I think the water tastes just a little bit flat because it's pulling so much out of it. So you could possibly even remineralize your water if you wanted. So the big question is, what are these total dissolved solids that we're seeing? If they're lead and arsenic and things like that, then that's a problem. If they're calcium, magnesium, little trace amounts, even copper, not that big a deal. So that's where we'll do further water testing. But really happy to see how well the Q3600 is performing, and definitely makes it worth installing and using that exclusively for our cooking, our drinking, and our ice making. So we've been using this system for well over a month now, and the only challenge I have from it is the reduction of water pressure that we're seeing. That reduction, I feel, however, is due to some of that algae that we're seeing build up. So once I shock the well and get that cleaned out, then I think that's going to help eliminate that, because it gums up the spin down filter within 12 hours. So back flushing, all those things, about every couple days I have to take it out and wash it out. So that's an issue inside the well that we'll have to remedy, and I think that will help the water pressure tremendously. One other benefit I like about this company and their equipment is nothing is proprietary when it comes to the cartridges. Now the Q3600 I think has their own cartridges, but everything you see in the whole house system, you can go to your local box store and get those same filters. But their team online was really helpful to discuss exactly what we needed and what we're trying to accomplish. So they kind of have that expertise to back that up. So I'm going to put some links down below to all the products we use, to the main website, discount codes, all those things that are applicable. Check those out. And if you're just in the building or pre-building stage of your homestead, make sure you're considering what you're going to do to have clean, reliable drinking water for your homestead and for your family. Water on the farm is not just for the animals as well. All right. Appreciate everybody watching. Y'all take care.